parameterized queries? Are they dynamic queries? And once you have all of these most serious security risks, right, then all of a sudden you can decide what you want to do with the data. Now you have the knowledge. So let's talk about do you have security baked into your plan? Is everybody here? Are they part of like a security group? Or no? Okay. So does everybody have developers, managers? Okay, let's do a show of hands. Ready? Managers? Yeah, you wanted Jack. Jack's got some good talk. Developers? Okay. So how many of you actually have security built into your SDLC right now? Okay, a few. Right. How many of you, when you start a project, do you actually have good requirements? Or do you go with the rapid prototyping method? Right? I mean, unless you think about this stuff up front, right, and unless you actually start baking security into the way that you build software, how can you build secure software? It's almost impossible. So, before you start, you want to have at least 80 to 85% of your requirements figured out. You want to know what you want to build. You want to make sure that you're putting the security use cases and abuse cases and non-functional requirements. Right? You don't want to just put in, I press this button and this piece of data displays. Right? You need to actually put in, I press this button, it goes through a validation mechanism, and then it goes through an encoding mechanism, and then the data is displayed. You want to actually build those into your requirements. And you also need to define, which security requirements are going to pose a risk. Which ones do you think are going to be very, very difficult to implement? And you need to address that risk as soon as possible. So when you start, you want to build that working end-to-end skeleton of the system. You want to make sure that, hey, this is the way it's going to work. I've addressed all of my technical risks, right? I have my security mechanisms. They're starting to be put into place, right? And now I have a working, straw man of the application. And then I start plugging the pieces in. And as you're doing this, you want to build early and often, right? You want to preferably integrate, some sort of detection in that nightly build. You want to integrate some sort of automated detection, so if a developer does use, a dynamic query instead of a prepared statement, one is injectable, one isn't. You want to be able to, tell him right away. And, not only do you want to tell him, but you want to educate him at the time that you tell him. And one of the most important things that I think a lot of people overlook and they miss is they don't think about the tools that you're going to need. Right? They want you want your developers to go out and build secure code, but you're not giving them the appropriate tools to build it. Right? You're giving them a compiler, you're giving them an IDE, and you're giving them requirements. Right? Well, how about giving them some tools that are actually going to start checking for security vulnerabilities? How about giving them a tool when they when they type in that security buggy code, right? It pops up a dialog, kind of like Java does now, or even .NET does now. When you have a programming error, when a little like instant feedback type of thing. I'm not sure if that actually exists today. You want to make sure that you're providing them with, the appropriate guidelines, the code reference guide. Anybody have code reference guides at their company? 2, 3, 4? You can't raise your hand twice. Okay. So 4 or 5 people here out of everybody, right? I mean, coding guidelines. If you don't know how to write a secure query, why would you write one? You're just gonna take the first example that you find off of Google, cut and paste, change it to match what you need, right? And you think you're good because it came from Google, okay? I would much rather look at a secure coding reference that actually had the right example, the right syntax for me to use. Okay, almost done, guys. So building your, when you start thinking about your security requirements, you want to make sure that you're very specific. So here's some examples of some use cases. An authorized user logs into the system by entering the correct username and password. Okay, well that's a great use case. What about when the authorized user enters the wrong password? Do you log the password? Do you log the username? If somebody enters the wrong password, do you log the username? It's an interesting question, because if you log the username because you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, I want to know who they're trying, what the account is they're trying to break into, right? Well, how many people have fat fingered it and forgot to hit the tab or the return key and typed in their username and password on the same line? Okay, you definitely don't ever want to log the passwords, even incorrect passwords, because it could be one character off, or it could be very similar to the real one. But even logging the username brings up a bit of an issue, right? Because you could be logging a real user's password. If somebody if somebody tries to enter a SQL injection statement in the username and password, what do you do? Right? You need to have those requirements, and they need to be a little bit more specific too. Because if you have a requirement that says the application shall provide access control to the function getSalary, that's a little bit too generic for me. Right? It's not specific enough. So if you can make it a little bit better by saying the application should provide role-based access control using mechanism X to function getSalary, and then you could even further qualify it more to actually specify what the roles are that have access to that functionality. Got to hurry up here. Okay, so you want to make sure that your security policies are well understood. You want to actually call out in your requirements, hey, we want to use this particular encryption algorithm. Don't leave it up to the developer to choose or to write their own. You want to actually call out the fact that, hey, we as an organization, we have these validation libraries that have been looked at by a lot of people, right? Let's go ahead and use this common infrastructure for our validation libraries. You actually want to call out, don't use javax.sql.statement. It's bad, right? Use prepared statement and don't use it dynamically, right? You want to call out stuff like that inside of your security policy so that developers know what to do and what not to do. Okay. Although I've been talking quite a bit about the developer in the last couple of slides, hopefully, you realize that it's not just about the code that's under current development. It's about all of the code that you acquire and use, right? So when given a choice, are you choosing the most secure application? Right? Are you comparing the relative security of like applications? Are you comparing the security against open source versus internal? When you choose a provider, are you measuring the security of their practices as well as the security of their deliverables? Are you actually giving them the proper language? And do you have the proper acceptance tests to guarantee that you're getting secure software from those external entities? And when you buy software, are you asking them? Somebody told me once that you got to repeat something 7 times before they actually get it, right? Now, when I go to church on Sunday and the priest repeats it 3 times, I get a little annoyed. However, I know I'm repeating things 7 times because it's dark in here. So you want to make sure that you ask your vendors, and I'm not talking your virus scanner vendor, right? I'm not talking about these little one-off desktop applications that you're buying. Right? I'm talking enterprise software that you're buying that you're going to run in your enterprise. Those are the vendors that you need to be asking these these big security-related questions and whether or not they have proof. So this would be one way that you might go about implementing, the way to certify outsourced software. You build yourself a certification team so that whenever that source code comes in, right, you do source code analysis on it against a known set of requirements.